Committee on Wednesday the 20th of July. It's 2 p.m. I'm chairman of this committee. My name is Councillor Paul Wood, and on my right is Councillor Kathy Rice-Oxley, who's vice chairman. And on my left is Sarah Downs, and I'm pleased to welcome you back, Sarah. Thank you. I think on the screen we've got Paul Cutler from District Grant Thornton. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, welcome, distinguished guests. Right, welcome everybody. First item is apologies for absence. Sarah?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Sue Woolley. Thank you.
Disclosure of interest. If anybody's got any interest to disclose, they can do it now or at any time during the meeting. Oh, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of June. Has anybody got any comments on those minutes? Anybody raise their hands, got any comments on those minutes of the 8th of June? If not, I would like to propose that we accept those minutes. Got a seconder? Councillor Gloria Johnson, seconder. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Those minutes are approved. Next item is update from the previous meeting on page 11. We've got 2 items. One of them's been completed. Minute number 5 is to be confirmed, and I think Richard Wiles has got an update for us. If you could, Richard, please.
Yeah, just to say that there was a 3-month extension given by the courts for the repayment of the monies due to the council. So that's now due by the 30th of September.
Thank you, Richard. I don't think there's any vote required on that. If we move on now to the external audit report. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure at the last meeting we mentioned the review of scrutiny, and I thought we were going to be told the flight path. Can you remind me what the flight path of the review of scrutiny will be?
Scrutiny is... Repeat the question, please, Councillor Baxter.
The council undertook a review of scrutiny.
Yes.
It has been published recently.
Yeah.
I'm sure I mentioned it at the last meeting, and I wanted to know how that review of scrutiny was going to be presented to the council or to the councillors.
That doesn't really relate to this committee as governance and audit, does it? Then?
Well, I would have said that it was the governance of the council is the responsibility of this committee. So the scrutiny arrangements.
You're talking about a scrutiny review that has been on the cards for quite a few months now, aren't you?
Yeah.
And is now that's a scrutiny review. It won't necessarily come to this governance and audit committee, will it?
If it's not coming here, can you clarify where is it going?
I think we'd have to ask the question, but
that's what I'm doing. I'm asking the question.
Yeah, well, I can't answer it.
Is there anyone in the room who can answer the question?
I could ask Graham Watts if he could answer that question. I don't know, Graham, do you want the scrutiny review? Are you able to answer it, or do you want to answer it? I certainly can't.
Chairman, I think the intention is that the scrutiny review and the implications of the scrutiny review would come either before this committee or the Constitution Committee. The specific details in relation to the timetable and the journey in relation to that scrutiny review, I would like to just confirm with the relevant cabinet member before committing anything at this meeting, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Could I follow up and ask who is the relevant cabinet member?
Councillor Linda Wood.
Okay. I think you actually knew that, Councillor Baxter, didn't you? Because you've been in communication with Councillor Wood.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, thank you. District Audit Annual Report, and I'll introduce Paul Cutler. Paul, would you like to take us through your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to explain what this report is,
So taking a step back, in terms of the Code of Audit Practice, which directs the responsibilities of the auditor in a local government, when a new code was issued in 2021, they decided to split the value for money conclusion from the financial statements conclusion. So previously, when we provided our audit opinion, it also included a section on value for money. And that was a binary yes/no, whether or not we thought there were appropriate arrangements in place. So from 21 onwards, that approach has been changed. Instead, auditors are required to provide commentary across 3 criteria. And that's the format of this report. So financial sustainability, governance, and then the 3 E's. And then rather than any conclusion, they can raise various types of recommendations that are explained in the report, from very significant and serious for what are statutory recommendations through to improvement recommendations. So that is why you therefore have this output, which is a new document from 2021 onwards. And it is just explaining the commentary across the 3 criteria. I'll take the report read, but happy to take any questions on detail. But in terms of the kind of high level summary, I would suggest that it should be taken as quite a positive report on the arrangements in place within the council. So we've got 2 improvement recommendations, which I would suggest are very low. If you were rag rating these things, I wouldn't say they are significant issues. There was one around risk management, and that's around potentially improving the arrangements in place by just doing things a little bit different. And then the other one is around the consideration of the assets that the council has in terms of operational assets and investment property. Obviously, your investment properties are relatively low compared to other districts, but your operational assets are, relatively, you've got significant levels of operational assets. I think with COVID in particular, it's kind of, it's very much changed how services are delivered by councils, but it's also changed how your staff are working as well. So that recommendation is very much around having a think and a strategy around whether or not the assets that you've got at the moment are right for you. Because obviously if you're holding, for investment properties, it's around risk. For operational assets, you're paying for their maintenance. So do you need all the various buildings that you have to deliver your services as they are going forward? So I would consider it a positive report. The finance element, the narrative there is explaining the impact of COVID and the uncertainty that led to local government finances at the beginning of the pandemic. And obviously there was significant government loans and funding to support councils in the services they delivered. But, the council still was able to deliver a financial position despite the challenges on actually staff in terms of the services that the council was required to provide, but also the loss of income streams. So I think that would be something that I would want to draw to the committee's attention in terms of something that should be commended. But other than that, I'm more than happy to take any questions on the report. It doesn't require approval or anything, so it's been agreed with management. So it's come to this committee, obviously, just for your for the visibility of the messages within it.
Thank you very much, Paul. I've read the report, and I must admit I was very impressed with it. Really, you've said some very positive things about it, and like you've said, out of all what you've looked at, the only recommendations which are fine, which are 2 what seem to be fairly minor recommendations. They are positive recommendations. I think that's constructive. So no problems with that. And I'd like to just point out some of the comments you've actually made the council has consistently demonstrated a track record of robust budgeting setting and delivery. So generally, to me, I don't know why it seems to me, I think you probably agree with me, Paul. Well, would you agree with me that is a pretty good report on SKDC and the actual elements that you've looked at? Because there's three main elements of work that you've looked at, aren't there? There's a financial sustainability, governance, improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. Now, I know it's not for the current year, but it's for the year up till March 21. So all in all, I think you've basically given the council a thumbs up, haven't you? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as an auditor can be positive and give anybody a thumbs up, then yeah, I mean, it's the report is, in my view, is positive. And the kind of caveat is that obviously the sector is incredibly challenging in terms of funding and the pressures, and councils are having increasingly being required to undertake various novel ways of balancing the books, which has led, in the most recent 4 or 5 years to some very high profile issues and failures coming about from various investment decisions and the kind of potentially the governance around that. So yeah, I think it's positive, but it's also, it's the context and the background is that, you have to, there are challenges. Savings will need to be delivered going forward. There is a track record of doing that. So you seem well placed to meet the challenges that will be upcoming in the next few years. So it's you can't afford to be complacent or stand still.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I'll open it up for questions. And Councillor Ian Stokes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this audit report that you show to us is based for the year ended 31st of March 2021, even prior to the fact you started on the audit for 2022. One presumes this is what we can expect the next year's audit report to look like. But that doesn't necessarily follow. You may find different things. You may want to start with things. This is just a sample of what you can give, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the scope of the work is based on the requirements of the code for 2021, which will remain similar for 21-22. So yeah, our review of the subsequent year will be covering similar things. So I would expect that governance arrangements, for example, will remain relatively unchanged. But I think there will be, there's clearly new things for us to look at in terms of the financial sustainability element, and considering the budgeting process, is the financial delivery, etc. So it will follow a similar format, and it will cover similar things. But there will be new information to consider, particularly around that financial sustainability criteria.
The Vice Chairman would like some comments, please, Kathy.
Thank you. Just something for the committee to note, really. So on page 21, so it talks about the major policy decisions being taken to the Scrutiny Committee. So I think we've had a slightly more recent review on scrutiny specifically. And following this, I believe we're looking to develop a way for scrutiny committees to be involved at a slightly earlier stage in the decision-making process. And that will help with openness and transparency. I think that'd be a very positive step. I'm sure if that review on scrutiny could come to this committee, I'm sure we'd be very pleased to see it. Thank you.
All right, Richard Wiles, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of put on record my thanks to Grant Thornton, who undertook the piece of work. It was far more thorough and robust under this new code requirement, as Paul has said. A lot more evidence was required, a lot more information was sent to satisfy those three criteria that are set out in the report. And I think it's right to say, there's no complacency on the council's side in terms of this report. It is positive, but there's clearly more to do. Everything isn't perfect, and no council would say they are, but clearly on the scale of some difficulties other councils have experienced, even those that have issued notices, those that have experienced some real difficulty with their commercial agenda, those that have lost significant sums under their investment portfolio. I think that the sense back from Grant Thornton is the council is well positioned to weather future challenges, and the majority of its arrangements are sound and fit for purpose. Clearly 2021-22 year, when that gets looked at, will brought fresh challenges forward as well, and no doubt Grant Thornton will want to probe into those furthermore. But I think in terms of taking what we've got, overall it's a very positive position.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any more comments or questions? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. On the front page, the report says that it's dated May 2022. On the footer of each page, it says it's February 2022. I don't know, due to my inexperience, I'm not sure why it takes from the end of a financial year right through to February to finish this report. But even so, where was it between February and May? And where was it between May and July? I think what I'm asking is this the earliest time that the report was available? And why has it got two different dates on it? My second question relates to the last paragraph on page 5. Can somebody explain the sentence which reads, in February 2020, the C driving savings and efficiencies? And I've got another one after that, but I'll happily take that.
Okay. Paul, do you want to answer that? What about the time scale, really? It's noted on the front, it's the year ended 31st of March, and it's got May on it. And then on some of the pages, it's got February. Is that just
that's correct. Yeah, so we started drafting the report in February. I think by the time it was concluded, so in terms of us finishing the work and receiving management responses, we updated the cover, the front page to May. We obviously then, I don't think we obviously didn't realise the header, the footer hadn't been updated as well. So it should really all say May, to be honest. In terms of the timelines, I can't comment between May and July in terms of why it's come to this committee. Don't know if it's a scheduling point of perspective. In terms of the work being started in February and being reported in May, so the original intention was that this work would be completed alongside the audit of the financial statements, but then the NAO and government agreed that there would be a 3-month window subsequent to the sign-off of the accounts, which obviously at this council was in October. So we should have been in a position to issue this report earlier than that. The reason we didn't was just around capacity. So the councillor might be aware of some of the issues in the sector in terms of the delivery of financial statements audits is still ongoing, and that just has meant that there has been delays in completing elements of work, which is why this report has gone later. So certainly the reason why it wasn't finalised in February is very much down to the external audit's capacity. Subsequent to that, I think I'd need for management just to confirm the meetings schedule in terms of why it's now July. I'm not aware of when the previous meeting was.
Got further questions, Ken?
Thank you for your answer. In the final paragraph on page 5, there's a sentence which reads, in February 2020, the C driving savings and efficiencies.
Yeah, I mean that's quite clearly a typo that we didn't spot in the review process for whatever reason. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head what that sentence was meant to say, to be honest, but I don't think it substantively changes the conclusions in the work. But I mean, we would be happy to revisit and reissue the report, both with the footer being consistent, but also with either that sentence being removed or with it, or me being able to clarify what the sentence should have been in the drafting and what it is.
Thank you. Clearly there's an issue with attention to detail, but the thing that caught my eye most was the first paragraph on page 5, which says, second paragraph, which says, processes in place incorporate an appropriate level of challenge and scrutiny from committees to ensure budgets are achievable operationally. I wonder how you drew that conclusion, because it certainly isn't my conclusion. I'd like to know, which committees did you attend or review? Did you pay attention to the strange profiling and underspends within particular departments, particularly on the housing revenue account? And did you look at all at the money that was given to arm's length companies, such as the £3 million or more that was given to Invest SK?
Mr. Chairman, obviously, Paul will respond from a Grant Thornton point of view, but of course, what this audit was looking at was the arrangements that are in place to satisfy the criteria that Paul said in his presentation. It wouldn't be looking at particular examples or situations or transactions that are being referenced in that question. It was more of an overview audit that it was looking at rather than specifics.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councillor Baxter, I know you're asking lots of specific questions. I can understand why, but I think, to me, the overall opinion, I obviously visited, Paul visited district audit, went to some committees, probably not all of them. I wouldn't expect them to go to all of them, but to get a general opinion. And to me, it's quite clear what their general opinion is. I'm quite happy to accept that. You don't seem wanting to accept that. You're wanting a lot more detail.
I'd like to know how, from attending or reviewing any of our committees, you came to the conclusion that the challenge and scrutiny was adequate.
Okay, Paul, are you able to say that? Presumably,
yeah. I mean, well, we obviously do attend committee meetings and we review minutes, and from that work, that is our conclusion.
I think, Councillor Baxter, we've got to accept this is Grant Thornton, this is Paul from Grant Thornton, the district auditors. It's their independent professional opinion. So I mean, you can question it as much as you like, but that's their opinion. They're independent. They've done a report. This is what their findings are. I know you seem to be trying to challenge it, which is fair enough, but I'm happy to accept it as an independent report from the district auditor, which is quite a distinguished, Grant Thornton are very distinguished district auditors. They're going into it, they're giving their opinion on the council. I'm quite happy to accept that, and I'm pleased with the report. So, thank you. Shall we now move on? I know it doesn't call for a vote at this, but I think it would be useful if we voted to accept the district audit report, and certainly thank them and thank Paul and Grant Thornton for all the work they've done. They've looked at it and their independence in this matter in looking at it. So I propose we accept this report. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stokes, Councillor Ian Stokes has seconded it. All those in favour, we accept the report, please. That's got there. All those who don't want to accept the report, and
I'd like my objection noted, please.
Okay. Okay, now we'll move on. Next item is the draft financial outline, item 8. So, Richard, are you doing this or?
Councillor Stokes will introduce the report, and then I just wanted to have a couple of comments, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm in attendance today. So I'm pleased to present the outturn report for the provisional outturn report for the 21-22 financial year. The report provides detailed information for the following areas. for the general fund and the housing revenue account, revenue, capital and reserves position as at the 31st of March 2022. The report was presented to FEDCO on the 27th of June 2022 and also went to Cabinet on the 12th of July of this month. Both the committee of FEDCO were very thorough in their review of the report, and they recommended this. Both Cabinet and FEDCO have recommended to Governance and Audit to approve the budget carry forwards. The backdrop to the 21-22 financial year has been one of continual uncertainty, with the start of the year having further social restrictions, further income losses in key areas, car parking, markets, art centres, and additional cost pressures. And we know 22-23 will be as well. During the year, members have been fully kept up to date with financial position and outlook through a series of budget monitoring reports, both FEDCO and Cabinet. So overall, the outturn report is favourable and there is not a deficit on the general fund revenue account. The COVID reserve, which was established to protect the council's finances from unexpected costs, can now be closed down, and it is recommended in the recommendations on page 33 and 34 to be redistributed to other reserves to bolster balances for the future. You will all note that the proposal to create an inflation reserve in order to provide financial resilience to inflationary pressures, utility price increases and fuel increases. And it is proposed that 500,000 will initially be added to this new reserve, but of course it is not possible to confirm whether this amount will be sufficient over the course of the year, and further modelling and forecasting is being undertaken. The same pressures will be relevant for the HRA, and these will be met from the HRA reserves as required. Of course, this new financial challenge will feature in the budgeting setting discussions for 23-24, as it is accepted that the financial uncertainty will remain for the medium term. And that is all I've got. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stokes. I think it's important to note with this that although it's been through, the Cabinet have approved it and recommended it to us, FEDCO have looked at it, one of our scrutiny committees have looked at it, recommended it to us, but it's our committee as Governance and Audit that are asked to actually approve it. So we're the one who got to approve it. Could I ask, is there any members got any questions regarding the report? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wish to reiterate that we really do need to worry about the continual underspends on the housing revenue capital programme. People are crying out for houses and we're building very, very few. We were promised 300 over 3 years, or was it 500 over 5 years? And we are struggling to hit double figures in recent years. Meanwhile, we're losing properties through right to buy. I realise that the housing department is in turmoil after the various things that have gone wrong in that department, and they're putting it back together. However, we need to move at pace to deliver quality, reliable housing for people, both the existing stock and the new stock. So, I mean, if there's anything that stands out in this report, it's the massive underspend on the housing revenue capital account.
Okay.
I just made the point that this that particular item is on the Finance Committee's work plan. I think it's a future agenda items coming forward for members to look at the pipeline for new build. But I would also make the point that the HRA, like the General Fund, has finite resources. It doesn't have an inexhaustible supply of money. So it has got to temper ambitions around new build with also the findings of the stock condition survey that are imminently being reviewed, which will then put further pressure on the resources of the HRA to maintain quality housing. And there's also emerging legislation to upgrade stock to energy efficiency levels that are higher than some of the stock is currently at. So there are competing pressures, not only about replacing lost stock through right to buy with new stock, but also about maintaining the quality. So there is a balance to be struck there. Of course, the other element is the council itself doesn't need to be a house builder, it can be an enabler. So it's not only about the council trying to do everything, but it's working with partners such as registered social providers, bringing forward affordable sites, supporting housing associations. So it is a mixed approach that needs to be adopted. And I think all of this is in the mix for the review of the business plan and the emerging findings from the stock condition survey.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for that, not Councillor. Kathy, do you want to speak?
Just say, yeah, perhaps if there was a mechanism for getting that information out, because I can see Councillor Baxter's point, perhaps we need to put that somewhere. I don't know whether it go this report or somewhere else, but obviously that's a very complex picture. And you know, if a member of the public wanted to understand that, it'd be good if that could be out there somewhere. Just on the report, the layout of the report, I just wonder whether there might be, I can see why it's printed like this, and if you've got a paper copy, it's absolutely fine, but having the appendices separate from the text itself, if you're looking on a computer screen, and you know, you're constantly scrolling down to find the appendices is quite difficult. I wonder if going forward, whether it might be possible on our website, when people look up the stuff on the website, whether there could be a version with integrated appendices, so that as they're going through, they have all the tables as well as the commentary. Just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Stokes?
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Rice. We'll take that back. The format that is in front of you was the one requested by the previous FedCo chairman. So that's why it's like that. But we will, yeah, we'll take that forward, and we'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just comment. Councillor Baxter, you raised issues about the housing revenue account. Other members might not be aware that we do have regular briefings that both you and I attended with the Director of Housing the other day. And we were particularly pleased about the progress being made on housing revenue issues, inspections and that. I think there are a lot of things coming down the line, as Richard Wiles says, about energy efficiency and the stock conditions, so that it might result in a necessary expenditure on our houses, because obviously we want to bring them up to standard energy efficiency wise and modernisation. But at the moment, I think housing on their revenue account, this is making good progress, and the reports that we get back from the Director for Housing show that they are making good progress. And we both actually agreed with that the other day. Councillor Baxter.
I didn't dispute that the Housing Department is making good progress, but that's from a standing start where 2 years ago, we weren't doing any of the inspections we were supposed to be doing, or very few. Fire risk assessments were virtually nil. And we've had to do this stock condition survey that hasn't been done for probably decades. This committee, for at least 4 years, this committee has been aware that we weren't hitting our targets on housing. We've been taken into special measures. We've got health and safety executive inquiries into what's happened at housing. So yeah, we're making progress, and everybody in housing is very busy, but that doesn't get away from the fact that this report about expenditure, I appreciate that the officer has said there's only a finite amount of money that can be spent on housing. Yes, that finite amount of money is 10 million, whatever the figure is in the table. That's the finite amount, is 10 million. How much have we spent? 2 million. So there's 8 million, but if you said to me, well, we haven't built any houses because we've been busy replacing everybody's roofs with solar panels, or we've been doing fire replacement doors or something, that would be fine if we'd spent the 10 million quid, but we haven't. We've barely touched it.
Okay. I think we'll move on now. We've got a recommendation on the bottom of page 33. The Governance and Audit Committee is asked to review and approve the Provisional Revenue and Capital Outcome Report and associated appendices for the financial years 2021-22. Note the budget carries forward Appendix D and H as approved by Cabinet on 12th of July 2022. Review and approve the following reserve movements in respect of the General Fund and that's in respect of the balance of the COVID recovery reserve of 1.286 million being transferred to one ICT reserve increase by 0.202 million, waste and recycling reserve increased by 0.084 million, creation of an inflation reserve of 0.5 million, and investor save reserve increased by 0.5 million. Do I have a proposal to accept that? Councillor Ian Stokes is proposing, and a second, Councillor Gloria Johnson is seconding. All those in favour, please vote, raise your hands. That's unanimous, thank you. We'll now move on to the next time, the draft statement of accounts. I think that's Alison, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I go through, I'll refer, if I'm referring to page numbers, it will be the page numbers of the agenda pack of the actual Appendix A statement of accounts. So Appendix A provides the provides the 21-22 draft statement of accounts for your review prior to the audit, which it will commence on the 1st of August. In accordance with the accounts and audit regulations, the accounts need to be published by the 31st of July and audited accounts need to be published by the 30th of November. There is a 6-week public inspection period for the statement of accounts, and this is proposed to be the 2nd of August through to the 12th of September, which allows members of the public to exercise their rights to inspect the accounts. As detailed in paragraph 1.5, the narrative report, which is on pages 85 through to page 98, provides more detailed information regarding the key financial statements, so the balance sheet, comprehensive income and expenditure statement, on any key movements between the years. So any material differences will be explained within that part of the document. Pages 189 to 219 provide the annual governance statement, of which members are asked to ensure that this is an open and transparent reflection of the governance arrangements for the financial year 2021-22. As detailed in paragraph 1.8, group accounts are still outstanding for the statement of accounts. This is because we hadn't received the draft financial statements for Leisure SK. They had been received for Gravitas, but when we consolidate them, we have to consolidate both accounts into our account. So we can't do one without having received the other document. Leisure SK accounts have now been received, but unfortunately, this is quite a lengthy process. So we haven't been able to provide them at this committee. But once the statement of accounts is published on the 29th of July, a link will be sent to all members of this committee so that you're able to review the group accounts. As audit progress, there may be amendments which need to be incorporated into the accounts, but further details of any changes will be provided at the committee on the 28th of November, so that obviously all committee members are aware of what the changes are. I'm happy to take any questions on the statement of accounts. Thank you.
Any questions from any members? Vice Chairman, Councillor Cathy Rice-Oxley, please.
Thank you. This is a question about the, I've not written down the page, page 153, sorry. So this is about the Environment SK. This is one of our arm's length companies. I think I've said before, it does concern me that these companies which have potentially serious consequences for the council don't get considered by this committee. We consider everything else in terms of financial processes and risk management, but we don't consider anything to do with the committees. In this paragraph, so we've got a substantial loan to Environment SK of over £500,000, so obviously underperforming at the moment. So my questions are, what's the mechanism for reporting in more detail than this paragraph? In terms of transparency, how could a member of the public take a view on the success or otherwise of this company? And thirdly, will a detailed statement of accounts go shortly to Companies Committee? Thank you.
The accounts for for Environment SK rather are published on Companies House, so members of the public are able to view those accounts, and they will. I don't know what date they'll go to Companies Committee, but we can confirm that and obviously report it back to this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
Given that Cabinet has recently said that we're going to explore options for finding an alternative provider other than Environment SK, what will happen to the outstanding loan of £500,000? And before I finish, I'd say I'm grateful to the Cabinet member for giving me some of the answers to a similar question that I asked offline. I don't know if you need to declare, not for me to declare your interests, Chair, but are you supposed to declare an interest at this point?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very, very good, Councillor Baxter. I don't need to declare an interest on the statement of accounts, but if we're particularly going in to talk about Environment SK, then yes, I will declare an interest as a director of Environment SK. I think that's what you're getting at, really. So on that particular issue, if we're going to talk about Environment SK, I will declare an interest and take no part in that. But on the general talk about the statement of accounts, then no, I won't. So yes.
I think just on the question, my understanding is Cabinet haven't made any decisions around the future of Environment SK. They've agreed to engage with the market to understand what the market could offer in terms of a grounds maintenance service, and that would be considered alongside the future of Environment SK. So clearly, it's probably a little bit premature to start anticipating what would happen with what-if scenarios, because we're not at that point.
Baxter.
I remember this being discussed at the recent, I think it was at the joint meeting of Environment and Culture, maybe, whichever committee it was. And at that stage, we said that it wasn't market engagement. We were going to start a procurement process. And if we're starting a procurement process, then there is a realistic outcome that the current provider might not get the contract. So I think it's a little bit more than market engagement. And I think we have got to the stage where the future of Environment SK is in jeopardy, really. Furthermore, I'd like to ask about these company accounts. They are not on Environment SK. They're certainly the accounts up to the end of March 2022 are not available on Companies House, unless I'm looking in the wrong place. The last ones I can see is exemption accounts made up to the 31st of March 2021. Also, if we're planning to get this finished by the end of July, there's not long in July now. Are we seriously going to get the draft accounts or whatever we need from Environment SK and Leisure SK before the end of the month? And will it be populated and will it be available?
Sorry, can I just deal with the first question and Alison will deal with the rest of the question? The market engagement and procurement process in my world were the same things. We're going to engage with the market through a procurement process to understand what the market can provide in terms of this service. So we can't prejudge what that might be. The market may come back completely silent. The market may come back with a very competitive offer. At that point, there'll be then a future decision, which is about, does the council consider and pursue that market response, or does it continue with Environment SK? So as I say, we're not prejudging the outcome of that process. So yes, definitely a procurement process is about to start with the market, and we'll see what comes back from that at the appropriate point.
To confirm, the accounts for Environment SK have been signed. They'll now be uploaded by the accountants to Companies House. And as stated previously, the accounts for Leisure SK have now been received. So we will be grouping those with Gravitas. There's no requirement for us to group Environment SK with our accounts. We just give an enhanced disclosure note, which is obviously detailed on page 153. The group accounts are in the process of being prepared. They will be completed before the 29th of July, the statutory deadline for uploading these to the internet. Thank you.
Thank you, Baxter, again. Thank you for that. There's one question outstanding, I believe, from Councillor there was a companies committee due, I think, next week, and I was hoping that they would discuss the £3 million that's been spent on Invest SK, as well as the situation with Environment SK, Gravitas, and the other arm's length companies. But that meeting has now been either postponed or cancelled. So can we have an explanation as to why that meeting has been postponed or cancelled?
I don't think, Councillor Baxter, yeah. No, I don't think that is relevant, really. I can't explain why that cancelled. I do know these companies. We have a companies committee that meets. Okay, it was cancelled. That's the main interest of those. Councillor Baxter, you focused on those issues. There's a lot of other things in these accounts. Okay, I'm a director of Environment SK. I've declared an interest in that. But those, Invest SK, Environment SK, it's the companies committee that mainly deal with those companies, not particularly us. They're mentioned here, yes. So I don't think it's relevant for us to say, when will companies committee look at it? Why was it cancelled? I don't know. That's a separate issue. It's a separate committee, isn't it? So I think I want to move on from that. Any more questions on the statement of accounts? No? Would anybody like to? Well, I think we should. I would propose that we accept these accounts. Could I have a seconder, please? Yeah. Councillor Ian Stokes. All those in favour that we accept them? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Councillor Baxter, abstention. Thank you. Now we go on to the next item, prevention of item 8, prevention of right to buy fraud. That's you, Tracy, isn't it?
That's me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So the report before you provides an update on the processes in place to safeguard with respect to right to buy sales of council housing. So there are two particular attachments to this. One is the procedural information, the process, if you like, that's undertaken. And then there's an anti-money laundering declaration form, which any applicant will be asked to complete, which attempts to get more information and more transparency as to the origins of the funding and the arrangements that are in place as part of the application. So just to rewind, all secure tenants have a right to buy their home, in this case, a council property. They've got to be a public sector tenant for at least 3 years. So that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be a tenant of this council. They can bring over their length of period of being a tenant from another authority, and that would still count towards their discount. So after 3 to 5 years, they get a discount of 35%, and thereafter it increases up to a maximum of 70%. So that process is established within law. So there are no discretions that we can apply in respect of the legislation that underpins it. Councillor Baxter alluded to right to buy sales earlier. We do sell about 40 per annum under the right to buy scheme, but we do have a legal obligation to make sure that the qualification process is followed accurately, and that we've undertaken due diligence and undertaken preventative fraud measures as part of that process. So the opportunity has been taken to compare. Sorry, am I right to continue? Sorry. So we've taken the opportunity to compare the declaration form with other councils to make sure that it is appropriate and fit for purpose. And one of the areas that we've focused in a little bit more is around the origins of the funding that's been used as part of that application to understand better how that money has been secured. So you'll see that in page 210, there's more information requested around source of funding. Of course, this is being checked at the front end in terms of finance colleagues, but also it's being checked in terms of the solicitors acting for the vendor and for the council as acting as the seller. So a lot more robustness, hopefully, in the process to attempt to identify potential anti-money laundering activity or spurious ways in which the funding's been accessed. So that's the purpose of the review. So open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions on right to buy fraud? Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. From reading the report, it looks as if this is good practice that we're implementing because it's good practice. Do we have any reason to suggest that there is or has been any fraud, or is it something that will come out when this is implemented? I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying, is it something that is particularly on our radar, or is it just something that we need to have in place?
Yeah, I mean, as a general comment, clearly it's good practice to review these kind of documents on a periodical basis, but also there were a couple of examples where, upon evidence of the funding source, that led to subsequent questions being asked of the applicant in terms of the origins of that funding. So clearly, if you get a bank statement and there's a slug of a deposit of 50,000 gone in, and now they're applying for their house, then clearly we're going to want to understand better how that money's been arrived at, the origins of that, and satisfy ourselves that it's appropriate, that funding is good for the application proceeding. So there were some anecdotal questions that were asked outside of the form at that point, which led us to think actually we might need to review the form to make it clear and more resilient to those kind of questions.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? No? Are we all quite happy to accept that report then? I would propose that we do accept it. Could I have a seconder, please? Yeah. Councillor Gloria Johnson. All those in favour, we accept the report? Unanimous. Thank you. Now just before we move on to the next item, I know on item 7, we approve that. Our Vice Chairman's got a question she'd like to ask.
I'm so sorry, committee. I hadn't realised that we were taking the annual governance statements together with the statement of accounts. Could I please ask a question on page 201? Governance issues, areas of focus coming up for 22-23. Could we have some clarification on the last 3 of those? So we've got undertake a 6-month assessment of the peer review. Could we hear what form that's going to take? Are we looking at results against any targets that were set off of the peer review? Who's going to be consulted with that? Is it going to be published? Develop an action plan to respond to the council scrutiny review. So we mentioned the scrutiny review. So an action plan, which apparently, according to this timeline, should be in place. Well, is the action plan going to come to us? Is it going to be published? Again, how is that going to be worked out? And the last one, undertake a further review of the council's companies to ensure they're fit for purpose. And this has obviously been done from a finance perspective by the look of it. And that's due in October. So which companies, what form is that going to take? Which committee will that be coming to? And will it include recommendations going forward? Thank you.
So in each of those in turn, yeah, and apologies, we should have referenced the AGS was a key element of that agenda item, because clearly this is coming to you as a draft document. It will then come back to you in November as a final document. So it is important the committee are satisfied that the AGS reflects the governance arrangements. Clearly you've heard from the external auditor in terms of their opinion of the governance arrangements, but clearly the committee will have a view as well. But in terms of the peer review, an action plan went to Cabinet in March 22, I believe, certainly around that time. An action plan set out the activities that were going to be done over what period and the targets. The peer review team are invited back to the organisation, I believe, in September, and they will be checking progress against that action plan. At that point, and I'd imagine then an update will go back to Cabinet to monitor progress against it. In terms of the scrutiny review, I think that is linked to, well, unfortunately, the Assistant Director's since left the room, so I believe that would be the review that was referenced earlier this afternoon. Yeah, I can't comment, unfortunately. I can try and get Graham back here. And then the final one, yes, it's from a financial perspective, because predominantly the business case around the formation of the companies was largely a financial question. So the ones that will be reviewed, clearly Invest SK has since been dissolved. Gravitas is expected to have a closure report sent to the committee once all the sales have been completed, of which we're down to the last 3. Environment SK, we've already talked about this afternoon as to whether the future of that company remains as it currently is, following the procurement process with the external market. And then clearly Leisure SK would be reviewed as well as part of that review, particularly around the management fee and the pressures that Leisure SK no doubt will come under in terms of the inflation and the utility price increases as well in terms of the resilience of the company. So the findings of that I would expect to probably come back here as potentially come this committee as well, depending on the findings, but clearly it's under a governance action plan, so predominantly should come here.
Just come back briefly. Yeah, I mean, it is governance, and I think it's important that we learn any lessons we can. Is that going to be a snapshot report, how they are now, or is that going to be more overarching, looking at the sort of the journey of those companies? I couldn't work out. So, are you including Gravitas? Or you're not including Gravitas because that one's being wound up?
Well, I'm not prejudging the outcome because there's no actual decision been made in terms of the future of Gravitas. Companies Committee asked that a closure report be presented. Now, the closure report is in the context of the development because Gravitas work plan is only Wherries Lane. It hasn't got a pipeline of projects beyond that. So the closure report is focused around the Wherries Lane development. The committee may take a view as to whether it wants to recommend the company is wound up, or it may want to recommend that there are further projects it embarks on. So I can't really preempt what the outcome of that will be. But certainly in terms of the review, it's in the context of the business plans and the PIDs, the initiation documents that were created at the time in which the business case came forward for the creation of them. So it's making sure they're still on the right path, if you like.
Okay, thank you, Richard, for that detailed explanation. We'll move on now to the work programme. You've all got a copy of the work programme. The next committee meeting is on the 28th of September. And I must say I'm pleased to say that internal audit progress report is on. I think we're all looking forward to seeing what internal audit are going to report on and what their reports are. It's been a few months now since we appointed the new internal audit, so it'll be interesting to see what their reports are like and what they've got to say. Has anybody got any comments on the work programme? Councillor Baxter.
Oh, thank you, Chair. First of all, if the review of scrutiny is going to come to this committee, then it should be on the work plan. It was mentioned at Constitution Committee the other day as being potentially a significant piece of work for that committee. But certainly I think that there is, within the terms of reference for this committee, we should be looking at it together rather than being shocked when one committee says one thing or one says the other. So if it's supposed to be on the work plan for this committee, then let's put it in the work plan for this committee. Secondly, I refer you back to page 9, the minutes of the last meeting. Under the item 8 work programme last meeting, I asked at the training that we had that I caught up on later on, it was said that we, the committee, should meet it privately with both internal and external auditors. When will this take place?
Right, Councillor Baxter, you did raise that last time. I think I answered it last time and I'll answer it again. That was one of the recommendations from the training session, which I'm right to say you didn't actually attend. You saw the video of it later. We probably will. I have had a meeting with the internal audit, and I did tell you that last time. In the future, we will probably arrange a meeting, but I can't give you any timescale for it.
Thank you for that. Is it something that we should put in the work plan? So at least we're aware that we're supposed to be doing it. And we did a training. They said you should be doing this. I'd like to know when we're, and yes, yeah. you did say last time.
Councillor Baxter, I've given you my answer. I will look at it to the future. I have met with internal audit and discussed things. I don't think we'll put it in the work plan. It's something that will be pending.
So on that point, there's been no progress since the last meeting. The next item...
No, I disagree with that. It's not a question of no progress. I have spoken to internal audit as chairman, and I've said we'll arrange something, but I'm not prepared yet. We haven't got a timescale for it.
Sorry,
you don't seem to want to accept that.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Chair. I thought that you meant you'd met the internal auditors before the last meeting. If you're telling me that you've met the internal auditors since the last meeting, then perhaps we've made some progress.
I think we have made progress. Yeah, I think that's the end of that.
Okay, and then the following item on that, oh yeah, that's a scrutiny review document, which I've mentioned already, so that's fine.
Any other comments or suggestions? But no. So are we happy to accept the work programme going forward? Yeah, I propose we do. Can I have a seconder, please? Kathy, all in favour? Thank you, unanimous. That I have no other business, so that brings us to the end of the meeting.